I stood outside the living room door, frozen. My hand gripped the cold glass of water I'd brought from the kitchen. Inside, I heard laughter, my own children's voices, loud and careless. Then came the words that punched straight through my chest. Dad's worthless now. Honestly, what does he even do anymore? More laughter followed, sharp and cruel. My daughter Emma's voice rang out next. He just sits around pretending he's still important. It's embarrassing. I felt my jaw tighten, my knuckles turning white around the glass. Part of me wanted to burst in, to confront them right there. But I didn't. Instead, I forced myself to smile, a small, bitter smile they'd never see. Let them laugh. Let them think they'd won. They had no idea that everything they had, every opportunity, every connection, every door that opened for them, came from me. They'd forgotten who built the ladder they climbed so easily. That was fine. I'd remind them soon enough, but not with words. With consequences. I turned away from the door, walking quietly back to my study. The foundation they stood on was still mine, and I was about to show them just how shaky their world could become without it. My name is Nathan Keller. I'm 53 years old, and I've spent the last 30 years building something most people only dream about, a network. Not just any network, but a web of connections spanning industries, countries, and power structures. I started from nothing, working my way up through late nights, hard conversations, and strategic moves that others were too afraid to make. Along the way, I built relationships with CEOs, politicians, investors, and influencers. People owed me favors. People trusted me. People returned my calls. That network became my legacy, or so I thought. I'd always imagined my children would appreciate it, would understand the sacrifices behind it. Instead, they saw it as their birthright. They used my name like a credit card, spending freely without ever considering the cost. Emma, my oldest at 28, worked in marketing at a tech firm. My introduction got her the interview. My call got her the job. But she never acknowledged that. My son Daniel, 26, landed a position at an investment bank. Again, my connection made it happen. He acted like his resume alone was enough. They took and took, never once saying thank you. And now they called me worthless. Sitting in my leather chair, I stared at my phone. I could end their careers with a single conversation. But that would be too obvious, too crude. No, this required finesse. This required patience. And I had plenty of both. I leaned back in my chair, letting my mind drift to the past. 10 years ago, when Emma was 18 and Daniel 16, I was at the peak of my career. I ran a consulting firm that connected businesses with the right people. My Rolodex was legendary. Back then, my kids watched me with something close to admiration. They saw the respect I commanded, the way people listened when I spoke. But admiration faded when comfort set in. I made sure they went to the best schools. I called in favors to get Emma into an elite private university where she met future tech executives and venture capitalists. For Daniel, I arranged internships that most kids would kill for. He spent a summer shadowing a hedge fund manager, my college roommate, who taught him everything about finance. They networked at parties I wasn't invited to, building relationships on foundations I'd laid. Every connection they made traced back to someone I knew first. Every door that opened had my fingerprints on the handle. Did they see that? Did they care? No. They saw only their own cleverness, their own charm. They believed they'd earned everything themselves. That delusion was comfortable for them. I let them live in it because I loved them. But love has limits, and disrespect crosses them. Sitting there in my study, I realized something important. They needed to learn. And I was about to become their teacher. Over the next few weeks, I watched them carefully. I became a silent observer in my own home, noting every careless comment, every dismissive gesture. Emma stopped asking about my day. Daniel barely looked up from his phone during dinner. My wife, Linda, tried to smooth things over, making excuses for their behavior. They're just busy, Nathan. Young people are stressed. I nodded, saying nothing. But I saw the truth. They didn't respect me anymore. I started paying attention to their professional lives. Emma was working on a major campaign for her company, trying to secure a partnership with a lifestyle brand. She mentioned it at dinner one night, her voice full of confidence. I've got this in the bag. The brand CEO loves our pitch. I smiled. That's great, sweetheart. How did you connect with them? She shrugged. Through networking. I've built good relationships. I didn't correct her. I didn't mention that the CEO's daughter had been Emma's college roommate, a connection I'd facilitated by paying for that expensive private school. Daniel was equally oblivious. He bragged about closing a deal with a major investor. My analysis impressed him, he said proudly. Again, I stayed quiet. That investor was my former business partner's nephew. I'd introduced them 2 years ago at a conference I'd brought Daniel to. They had no idea. They truly believed they'd done it all themselves. Watching them, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't anger anymore. It was strategy. At dinner one evening, I decided to plant the first seed. The conversation was casual, light. Emma talked about her upcoming campaign launch. Daniel mentioned a client meeting. Linda asked about weekend plans. Then I spoke, my tone relaxed. By the way, Marcus Chin is coming to town next week. The table went quiet. I kept my eyes on my plate, cutting into my steak. Emma and Daniel exchanged glances. I could feel their curiosity. Marcus Chin was a legend in tech and finance, a man whose name opened doors worldwide. He was also one of my oldest friends, someone I'd helped during a career crisis 20 years ago. He owed me and he never forgot it. Emma cleared her throat. Marcus Chin? The venture capitalist. I nodded. Yeah, we're having lunch. Catching up. Daniel leaned forward slightly. That's impressive, Dad. What's he working on these days? I smiled, taking a sip of water. Oh, projects, investments. He's always got something interesting brewing. I left it at that, letting silence fill the space. I could see their minds working, wondering if they should ask more, wondering if there was an opportunity they were missing. But they were too proud to seem interested in what worthless Dad was doing. Perfect. The seed was planted. Now I'd watch it grow bit by bit, until they realized too late what they'd taken for granted. Curiosity was a powerful tool. I just handed them a piece of bait they couldn't quite reach yet. A few days later, I overheard Emma on the phone in the living room. She was talking to a colleague, her voice animated and confident. No, trust me, this deal is locked in. I've got connections that make this seamless. My family's network is solid. I paused in the hallway listening. She went on, describing a business opportunity she was pursuing, one that required high-level introductions. She spoke as if these connections were hers by right, as if she'd built them herself. I felt a flicker of something dark and cold. She was using my network like it was her own inheritance, never acknowledging the source. Later that evening, Daniel did the same. He mentioned casually to a friend over the phone that he had access to influential investors. Yeah, I know people. It's easy when you've got the right contacts. I stood in the kitchen, listening through the thin walls, and something crystallized in my mind. They weren't just ungrateful. They were delusional. They genuinely believed they were self-made, that their success was independent of me. That delusion was dangerous, not just to our relationship but to their futures. They were overconfident, reckless even, assuming doors would always open because they'd always opened before. But doors only open when someone holds the key. And I still held every key they'd ever used. It was time to start locking a few doors and see how they reacted. At breakfast the next morning, I dropped another small comment. Spoke to Richard Vasquez yesterday. He's doing interesting things with his new startup. Emma looked up from her coffee. Richard Vasquez? The one from Silicon Valley? I nodded. Yeah, we go way back. He's launching something big in the next quarter. Daniel's fork paused midair. You know Richard Vasquez? There was surprise in his voice, maybe even a hint of disbelief. I shrugged. Sure. We've been friends for 15 years. I helped him with some early connections when he was getting started. The table fell quiet again. I could see the wheels turning in their heads. Richard Vasquez was a major player, someone whose endorsement could skyrocket a career. And I was talking about him like an old fishing buddy. Emma recovered first. That's cool, Dad. Her tone was careful now, less dismissive. Daniel just nodded, his expression unreadable. I finished my toast and stood up. Anyway, just thought I'd mention it. Have a good day, you too. As I left the kitchen, I felt the shift. They were starting to second-guess themselves just a little. Confidence was cracking. It wasn't much yet, but it was a start. I didn't need to confront them directly. I just needed to remind them, subtly and consistently, that the foundation they stood on wasn't as solid as they thought. And every reminder would chip away at their arrogance until there was nothing left but the truth. 2 days later, Emma called me. Her voice was tight, stressed. Dad, I need your advice. I've got a critical meeting tomorrow with the CEO of that lifestyle brand. I'm not sure how to approach it. I leaned back in my chair, phone pressed to my ear. What's the issue? She explained the situation. The CEO was hesitant about the partnership, asking tough questions Emma hadn't prepared for. She needed to pivot her pitch and fast. I listened carefully, then offered my guidance. But I framed it in a way that made her second-guess her original approach. You could emphasize the ROI, I said slowly, but that might come off as too transactional. Maybe focus on brand alignment instead? Though that could seem vague. I trailed off, letting uncertainty hang in the air. Emma hesitated. So, which one should I go with? I paused as if thinking. Hard to say. You'll have to read the room. Trust your instincts. It wasn't bad advice, but it wasn't the clear direction she wanted. I could hear her frustration over the phone. Okay. Thanks, Dad. After we hung up, I sat back and smiled. I just planted doubt in her mind without seeming unhelpful. She'd walk into that meeting second-guessing herself, and that hesitation would show. It was a small crack, but cracks grow. And when things started falling apart, she'd wonder why. I wasn't sabotaging her directly. I was simply withdrawing the silent support she'd always taken for granted. Over the next few weeks, I started documenting things quietly. I kept notes on my phone and computer, dates, names, deals, connections. I listed every opportunity I'd created for Emma and Daniel, every door I'd opened, every favor I'd called in. The list was long. Longer than I'd realized. For Emma, the college introduction that led to her first internship, the reference call that got her hired, the CEO connection for her current campaign. For Daniel, the internship with my college friend, the investor introduction that jump-started his career, the client he was currently courting, someone I'd met at a conference and introduced him to. Every success they claimed as their own had my fingerprints all over it. They'd built castles, yes, but they built them on sand. And I was the one who'd provided the sand, grain by grain, without them ever noticing. Sitting at my desk, I realized something powerful. If I removed my support, even quietly, their castles would crumble. Not immediately, but gradually as the foundation weakened and cracks spread. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, focused. This wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching them a lesson they should have learned years ago. Respect the people who help you rise because they're the same people who can watch you fall. And I was about to step back and let gravity do its work. A few days later, an old friend reached out. His name was James Porter, someone I'd worked with during my early consulting days. We'd lost touch over the years, but he'd tracked me down through mutual contacts. Nathan, I've got an opportunity one think you'd love, he said over the phone. He explained, a new venture connecting international businesses with emerging markets. It was ambitious, cutting edge, and perfectly suited to my skills. I need someone with your network, he said. Someone who knows how to make the right introductions. I listened, intrigued. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a chance to rebuild, to step back into the spotlight on my own terms. I'm interested, I said carefully. Let me think about it. After we hung up, I sat in my study, turning the idea over in my mind. This wasn't about Emma and Daniel. This was about me. For too long, I'd defined myself through my children's success. I'd poured everything into them, expecting gratitude, expecting recognition. But they didn't see me. Maybe it was time I stopped waiting for them to notice and started building something for myself again. James's offer was a lifeline I hadn't realized I needed. It was a reminder that I still had value, that my network was still powerful, that I wasn't worthless, no matter what my children thought. I smiled. Timing was everything. And this opportunity had arrived at exactly the right moment. I started pulling back. Not dramatically, not obviously, but in small, deliberate ways. When Emma asked for an introduction to a potential client, I said I'd look into it, and then didn't follow up. When Daniel requested advice on a pitch, I gave vague, non-committal answers. I stopped making calls on their behalf. I stopped reaching out to contacts to smooth their paths. For the first time in years, they were on their own. At first, they didn't notice. They were too used to things just working out. But slowly, cracks began to show. Emma's campaign hit a snag when the CEO she'd been courting suddenly went cold. She couldn't figure out why. I knew. The CEO's daughter, Emma's old college roommate, had moved abroad and lost touch. Without that personal connection, Emma was just another marketer with a pitch. Daniel's investor deal stalled. The investor stopped returning calls. Daniel was frustrated, confused. I said nothing, but I knew the truth. The investor's uncle, my old business partner, had retired and the connection had weakened. Without my active involvement, Daniel was just another junior analyst. Their frustration was subtle but unmistakable. Things that used to be easy were suddenly hard. Doors that used to open were now closed. And they had no idea why. I watched it all unfold, sipping my coffee in the mornings, calm and composed. This was just the beginning. One evening, tension finally boiled over. We were sitting in the living room, the TV on, but no one really watching. Emma was on her laptop, frowning at her screen. Daniel sat across from her, scrolling through his phone with a tight expression. I was reading a book or pretending to. Suddenly, Daniel looked up at me. Dad, why didn't you ever teach us how to do this stuff? You just let us figure it out. His tone was accusatory, almost bitter. I looked at him calmly. Do what stuff? Networking. Connections. All of it. You act like it's easy, but you never explained how it works. I closed my book slowly. I didn't teach you because I was too busy doing it for you. Silence. Emma's typing stopped. She glanced at Daniel, then at me. Daniel's jaw tightened. What's that supposed to mean? I leaned forward slightly. It means every opportunity you've had, every door that opened, every introduction that worked out, I made that happen. You just never noticed. Emma scoffed. That's not true. We worked hard for everything we have. I smiled, a small, sad smile. Hard work matters. But so does access. You had access because of me. You just thought it was yours by right. Daniel stood up, his face flushing. You think you're so smart, but you're just old. Out of touch. This is a different world now, Dad. I didn't react. I stayed calm, my voice steady. Age isn't the measure, Daniel. Experience is. And you'll learn that soon enough. He stared at me, frustrated, then turned and left the room. Emma followed. I sat there alone, feeling the weight of the moment. The confrontation had started. And it would only get worse from here. After that night, I went fully silent. No more advice. No more introductions. No more calls on their behalf. I focused on James's opportunity instead, diving into meetings and strategy sessions. It felt good to be building something for myself again, to be valued for my skills rather than taken for granted. Meanwhile, Emma and Daniel floundered. Emma's campaign fell apart when the lifestyle brand chose a competitor. She was devastated, unable to understand what went wrong. Daniel's investor deal collapsed entirely. The investor ghosted him, moving on to other opportunities. I watched from a distance, saying nothing. At dinner, Linda asked them how things were going. Emma forced a smile. Fine. Just busy. Daniel nodded, his expression tight. Yeah, busy. But I saw the truth. They were struggling and they didn't know why. Their confidence was shaken, their carefully constructed world beginning to crack. Behind the scenes, I was maneuvering. I reached out to old contacts, reactivating relationships I'd let fade. I made strategic moves, setting things in motion that Emma and Daniel couldn't see. James's venture was taking off, and my role in it was growing. People were calling me again, seeking my advice, valuing my input. I was reminded of who I used to be, and who I still was. The foundation my children stood on was crumbling, and I was building a new one, this time just for me. One afternoon, Daniel came home looking defeated. He slumped onto the couch, running his hands through his hair. Linda rushed over. What's wrong, sweetheart? He sighed heavily. I got called out in a meeting today. A senior partner asked me how I landed the Miller account, and when I explained my process, he just laughed. Said it was clear I'd had help but didn't know how to replicate it. Linda frowned. That's unfair. Daniel shook his head. No, it's not. He was right. I didn't land that account. Dad did. He made the introduction and I just showed up. I was standing in the doorway listening. Daniel finally looked at me. You set that up, didn't you? I nodded slowly. I did. 2 years ago. I thought you knew. He laughed bitterly. No. I thought I'd done it myself. There was no anger in his voice now, just exhaustion. For the first time he was seeing the truth. I walked into the room and sat down. Daniel, every connection you've ever made traced back to someone I knew first. That's not a bad thing. But you treated it like it was all you. He stared at me, silent. Emma appeared in the doorway, having overheard. Her face was pale. Is that true for me too? I met her eyes. Yes. She sat down slowly, the weight of realization settling over her. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Emma whispered, Why didn't you tell us? I looked at them both. I did. You just never listened. The next day, I ran into an old acquaintance at a coffee shop downtown. His name was Greg Miles, a consultant I'd worked with years ago. We chatted briefly and he mentioned seeing Emma at a networking event. She's doing well, isn't she? Greg said. I remember when you first introduced her to that crowd. Smart move on your part. I nodded. Thanks. Greg leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Between you and me, some people in the industry know her success came from your connections. It's not a bad thing. Plenty of people get help, but she should probably acknowledge it more. Makes her look naive when she doesn't. His words hung in the air. I thanked him for the coffee and left, but I knew what would happen next. Greg wasn't malicious, but he was a talker. He'd mentioned that conversation to others and word would spread. Emma's reputation, built on the assumption that she was self-made, would take a quiet hit. People would whisper. Not loudly, not cruelly, but enough to plant doubt. It wasn't my doing directly. I'd simply let the truth surface naturally. That was the power of a network. Information flowed and reputations were shaped by perceptions. Emma had never controlled the narrative because she'd never understood it. Now she was about to learn how fragile her standing really was. I didn't feel guilty. I felt calm. This was cause and effect. She'd taken credit for my work. Now the truth was catching up. A week later, Emma asked for my help with a new project. It was a big opportunity, one that could revive her career. She needed an introduction to a major investor, someone who could fund her company's expansion. I listened as she explained, her voice hopeful. When she finished, I shook my head. I can't help you with this one, Emma. Her face fell. Why not? I leaned back in my chair. Because you need to learn how to do this yourself. You can't rely on me forever. She stared at me stunned. But, you've always helped before. I nodded. I have. And that was a mistake. I made things too easy, and now you don't know how to stand on your own. Her eyes filled with tears. Dad, please. This is important. I felt a pang of guilt, but I held firm. I know it's important. That's why you need to figure it out yourself. She left my study without another word. Later, Linda came in, her expression troubled. Nathan, that was harsh. I shook my head. It was necessary. She'll never learn if I keep bailing her out. Linda sighed but didn't argue. Deep down, she knew I was right. That night, I lay awake, wondering if I'd made the right choice. But when I thought about their laughter, their mocking words, worthless, I knew I had. Respect is earned, not demanded. And they needed to earn it. A few days later, I discovered something troubling. Daniel had tried to bypass me entirely on a deal. He'd reached out directly to one of my oldest contacts, a man named Victor Leong, without mentioning me at all. Victor called me, confused. Nathan, your son contacted me about a partnership opportunity. He didn't mention you. I thought you'd want to know. I thanked him and hung up, feeling a mix of disappointment and anger. Daniel had tried to cut me out, to use my network without acknowledging me. It was the ultimate disrespect. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I let the situation play out. Victor, loyal to me, politely declined Daniel's proposal. He didn't explain why, just said it wasn't the right fit. Daniel was confused and frustrated, unable to understand what went wrong. I watched him spiral, knowing the answer but saying nothing. A few days later, another contact called. Nathan, Emma reached out to me about a project. She didn't mention you either. What's going on? I sighed. They're trying to do things on their own. The contact laughed. Without you? Good luck to them. I hung up, realizing my children had made a critical mistake. They'd assumed my network was theirs to use freely. They'd never considered that loyalty ran both ways and my contacts were loyal to me, not them. Their arrogance was about to backfire spectacularly, and I was going to let it happen. Over the next few weeks, a series of small failures cascaded. Emma's project stalled when the investor she'd approached turned her down. Daniel's deal with another client fell apart when the client chose a competitor. Opportunities they'd assumed were guaranteed slipped through their fingers. At dinner, the tension was unbearable. Emma picked at her food, silent. Daniel stared at his plate, jaw clenched. Linda tried to make conversation, but it fell flat. Finally, Emma looked at me. Dad, what's happening? Everything's falling apart. I met her eyes calmly. What do you mean? She gestured helplessly. My projects, Daniel's deals, it's all going wrong. And we don't know why. I took a sip of water. Maybe you're not as prepared as you thought. Daniel's head snapped up. That's not fair. We've worked hard. I nodded. I'm sure you have. But hard work isn't enough. You need the right connections, the right support. And you've been taking that for granted. Emma's voice cracked. So you're punishing us? I shook my head. No. I'm just not helping you anymore. There's a difference. Silence filled the room. They stared at me, stunned, as the truth finally sank in. Their success had never been entirely theirs. And without my support, they were struggling. I stood up, pushing my chair back. Respect is earned, I said quietly, not demanded. Then I left the table, leaving them to sit with their realization. A few days later, James called with exciting news. His venture had secured a major partnership, and my role in it was central. Nathan, this wouldn't have happened without you. Your network made the difference. I smiled, feeling a surge of satisfaction. Glad I could help. He paused. I'm serious. You're invaluable. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. His words hit me harder than I expected. For months, I'd felt invisible, worthless, dismissed by my own children. But James reminded me of the truth. I still mattered. I still had power. I still had value. That evening, I received another call from an old colleague who'd heard about my involvement in James's venture. "Nathan, I've got an opportunity you might be interested in. It's right up your alley." I listened as he explained. Another project, another chance to build something significant. My calendar was filling up again, my phone ringing with opportunities I'd thought were gone. Meanwhile, Emma and Daniel continued to struggle. Their confidence was shattered, their professional lives in disarray. They'd realized too late that the foundation they'd stood on was built by me. And I'd walked away. I didn't feel guilty. I felt liberated. For the first time in years, I was building something for myself, not for them. And it felt incredible. They'd learned their lesson eventually. But I wasn't waiting around for their apology. I was moving forward, unstoppable, reclaiming the life I'd put on hold for too long. One afternoon, Daniel asked me for advice on a pitch. He was trying to salvage a failing project and he was desperate. I listened as he explained his plan. It was ambitious but flawed. I could see the mistakes immediately: overconfidence, lack of preparation, poor timing. I could have pointed them out. I could have guided him toward a better approach. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds good, Daniel. Go for it." He looked relieved. "You think it'll work?" I shrugged. "You'll find out." He left my study and I sat back, knowing what would happen next. The pitch would fail. The client would see through the weak strategy and Daniel would be left scrambling. But he'd learn. He'd learn that confidence without preparation is just arrogance. He'd learn that success requires more than charm and ambition. He'd learned the hard way, the way I should have taught him years ago. A few days later, he came home defeated. The pitch had bombed. The client had called it unprofessional. Daniel looked at me, searching for sympathy. I offered none. "What happened?" I asked calmly. He explained, his voice shaking. "I thought I had it. I really did." I nodded. "You were overconfident. That's a dangerous thing." He stared at me, hurt and angry. But he didn't argue. Deep down, he knew I was right. And that realization was the first step toward real growth. As everything unraveled around them, I remained calm. Emma and Daniel were scrambling, their professional lives in chaos. But I was thriving. James's venture was gaining momentum, and my reputation was stronger than ever. At a networking event, someone introduced me as the man who connects the dots. People listened when I spoke. They respected my insights. They valued my input. I felt like myself again, confident, capable, powerful. Meanwhile, Emma and Daniel watched from the sidelines. They saw me succeeding while they struggled, and the contrast was stark. One evening, Emma pulled me aside. "Dad, how are you doing this? How are you bouncing back so easily?" I looked at her, my expression unreadable. "I'm not bouncing back, Emma. I never fell. You just assumed I had." She blinked, processing my words. "What do you mean?" I smiled faintly. "You called me worthless. But I was never worthless. I just stopped proving myself to you." Her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, I held up a hand. It's fine. You'll figure it out eventually." Then I walked away, leaving her standing there, stunned. The calm eye of the storm was mine. And I was perfectly at peace in the center of it all. By now, the consequences of their arrogance were undeniable. Emma had lost 2 major clients. Daniel had been passed over for a promotion. Their reputations were shaky, their confidence shattered. One night, Linda sat me down. "Nathan, they're really struggling. Maybe you should help them." I shook my head. "They need to struggle. It's the only way they'll learn." Linda sighed. "But they're your children." I met her eyes. "Exactly. And because they're my children, I want them to grow. I want them to be strong, independent, capable. But they'll never be any of those things if I keep bailing them out." She didn't argue. Deep down, she understood. The poetic justice of it all wasn't lost on me. They'd mocked me, called me worthless, dismissed my contributions. Now they were learning firsthand just how much they depended on me. They'd built their careers on my foundation, and when I pulled away, everything collapsed. It wasn't cruelty. It was truth. And truth, however painful, is the greatest teacher. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was simply satisfied. They needed this lesson, and I delivered it without malice, without revenge. Just quiet, steady consequences. And those consequences were speaking louder than any words I could have said. One evening they finally came to me. Both of them together. Their faces were pale, their expressions humble. Dad, Emma said quietly, we need your help. I looked at them, my expression neutral. With what? Daniel spoke next. We messed up. We didn't appreciate you. We didn't see what you were doing for us and we took it all for granted. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. We called you worthless. And we were wrong. You're not worthless. You're everything. I sat back in my chair, letting their words sink in. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not to gloat, not to punish, but to hear them finally understand. Respect is earned, I said quietly. Not demanded. And you didn't respect me. You used me, dismissed me, mocked me. And now you're realizing what that cost you. They both nodded, unable to speak. I leaned forward. I'm not going to fix everything for you. You need to rebuild on your own. But I'll guide you if you're willing to listen. Emma wiped her eyes. We're willing. We promise. Daniel nodded. We'll do better, Dad. I swear. I looked at them for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Let's start over. Relief flooded their faces. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. And sometimes that's all you need. Over the following months, things changed. I stepped into a new chapter of my life, one where I was valued and respected, not just by my children but by everyone around me. James's venture became a massive success, and my role in it was publicly recognized. I gave talks at conferences, shared my insights with industry leaders, and rebuilt my reputation on my own terms. Emma and Daniel, meanwhile, started rebuilding too. They worked harder, approached opportunities with humility, and slowly regained their footing. They asked for my advice and I gave it, but only when they truly listened. Our relationship wasn't the same. It was better. Built on mutual respect rather than assumptions. They no longer took me for granted. And I no longer sacrificed myself for their success. One evening, Emma called me. Dad, I got the partnership. The one I'd been working on. I did it myself, but I wanted to thank you for teaching me how. I smiled. I'm proud of you, Emma. Daniel sent a similar message a few weeks later. His deal had closed successfully and he'd handled it independently. I felt a swell of pride. Not because they'd succeeded, but because they'd learned. They'd grown. And that was worth more than any achievement. My children had learned the hard way. But they'd learned. And I had reclaimed my power without losing my integrity. Sitting in my study now, I reflect on everything that happened. The betrayal, the lesson, the growth. I didn't need to yell, threaten, or embarrass my children. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to step back and let them see the truth. They'd called me worthless. They'd forgotten that every connection they leveraged came from me. But I hadn't forgotten. And by quietly withdrawing my support, I'd shown them just how much they'd taken for granted. The lesson was clear. Know your worth, act with strategy, and never let betrayal break your calm. My children learned it the hard way, but they learned it. And I emerged unshaken, thriving, and truly unstoppable. My phone buzzes now with opportunities. My calendar is full. My network is stronger than ever. I'm not the man my children mocked in that living room. I'm the man I always was, powerful, connected, valuable. And this time everyone sees it, including them. I close my laptop, pour myself a glass of whiskey and smile. The foundation is mine again. And I'm never letting anyone forget it.